To the regular council meeting for April 2nd. I'd like to call the meeting to order. We acknowledge that this land is the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of the First Nations, comprised of the Ojibwe, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi peoples, and of the Huron-Wyandot peoples. We value the significant historical and contemporary contributions of local and regional First Nations and of all the original peoples of Turtle Island who have been living and working on the land from time immemorial. If you are able, please stand for our national anthem.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command.
Car ton bras s'est porté l'épée, il s'est porté la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits.
God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you. And if you are watching this tonight, you can make your way to our arena for 7 for an exciting 73s game and cheer on our team, and hopefully they will win. We have no closed meeting report tonight, and we have regrets from Councillor Mady tonight. He is out of town. Any declarations of conflicts of interest from members of council? Seeing none, I need a mover and a seconder that we adopt the published agenda with an amendment that we defer Councillor Mady's motion to the next meeting. Moved by Councillor Verbeek, supported by Deputy Mayor Shepley. Any questions? All in favor? Carried unanimously. I need a mover and a seconder to adopt the regular council meeting minutes for March 18th. Councillor Guerin, Councillor McGuire-Blaise, all in favor? That's carried unanimously. And a mover and a seconder for the special council meeting minutes held March 6th. Be adopted as circulated. Councillor Allard, Deputy Mayor Shepley, all in favor? And that is carried. We have no public presentations and no unfinished business. We will move to our reports from administration. We have our Fire and Rescue Services 2023 annual report, and Chief Pilon is here to speak to it. Welcome.
Mayor Bonnie, and good evening to council. It's my pleasure to be here this evening to speak to our 2023 annual report. 2023 proved to be another busy year for Essex Fire and Rescue. Our calls for service increased 17% from 2022. In 2023, Essex Fire responded to a total of 394 calls, with 34 of those calls being fires. So 8.6% of our total calls were fires in 2023. This includes structure fires, car fires, rubbish fires, grass and field fires. 15% of our 2023 responses were public hazard calls, which include calls such as natural gas leaks, chemical spills, and power line down calls or power lines arcing. It's important to note that a significant factor contributing to the rise in calls in 2023 were the 3 major storm events, which included the ice storm, the downburst in Harrow, and the intense rainfall event that led to inland flooding. During these 3 events, we were dispatched to a total of 64 calls. If you take away these events, our calls would have been almost identical to the previous year with a difference of 2. 23% of our responses in 2023 were false alarm calls. These include fire, smoke, and carbon monoxide alarm activations. Most of these responses are in residential homes, where a smoke alarm or carbon monoxide alarm is activated with no smoke or fire or CO present. These normally are one-time visits, which allows us to correct the issue with a new alarm, which were provided by the Harrow Rotary Club and Enbridge through donations. So if we respond to these occasions and alarms found to be faulty, we can leave them in compliance with the fire code for smoke and CO alarms and install a new alarm for them. As per the emergency response breakdown for false alarms in the report, the change from 2022 to 2023 shows how much percentage of incidents differ. Since there were more incidents overall, the overall difference for false alarm responses is negative 2% in 2023. It's important to note, as per our fee bylaw, if we attend a location more than 3 times in a calendar year, we can charge the current MTO rate per apparatus for false alarms. This normally takes place when a location fails to correct a fire alarm or fire code deficiency, which results in multiple false alarms to the same location. Moving on to training, we had another good year in providing training to our staff as part of our succession planning. Some of the training provided to our staff include NFPA 1021 level 1 and 2, which is fire officer training. That's for our captains to advance their training, and our firefighters who aspire to be captains one day. NFPA 1521, which is the incident safety officer. We recertified in first aid and CPR for all our fire staff. We did third-party advanced auto extrication. As we know, auto extrication evolves every year. With battery-operated vehicles and electrical vehicles, it's important for us to stay up to date on our training, and we provided AutoX again in 2023. Another important training that we provided this year was peer support training. And we're trying to focus on the mental wellness of our firefighters, ensure that they are taken care of. They see some things that people shouldn't, and we really want to, push peer support on our staff and offer that to them. We also attended ammonia awareness training at our arenas that was put on through community services staff from a third party. For Pub Ed and Prevention, I'll pass it over to Deputy Chief Brockman.
So 2023 obviously proved to be another successful year for our Public Education and Prevention Division. We carried out 330 fire inspections. They included routine, requests, complaint, safety concerns. We also have temporary foreign worker housing that we have to do every year, and short-term rental inspections now as well. So we also conducted 15 provincial mandated vulnerable occupancy inspections. Obviously, once again, those aren't just an inspection, those are inspections. And then we also have to witness staff carrying out fire drill operations and review their fire safety plans every year as well. For the fire safety public education, we attended over 77 events and touched roughly 10,000 people through that program. We were able to provide various information and pamphlets, handouts, helmets, and things like that. I also want to acknowledge the Harrow Rotary Club for donating $4,750 last year as well. That obviously helped us purchase 160 combination smoke and CO alarms, and then Enbridge Gas as well, which provided 210 combination alarms for us. So through those programs, that's extremely important for us. That helps us when we respond to these calls, if it's a false alarm, and we can then replace them and provide them free of charge to the residents. I'll pass it back over to Chief Pilon.
The standout statistic from 2023 is that our firefighters remain free of any significant injury, apart from the occasional minor bumps and bruises. On behalf of myself and Deputy Brockman, we are immensely proud of our firefighting team. We want to express our gratitude to them for their unwavering commitment, diligent training, and the sacrifices they make away from their families. Their dedication is remarkable, and they consistently deliver outstanding service to the residents of Essex. And I'm free to answer any questions.
Comments from members of council. Councillor McGuire-Blaise.
Well, thank you through the chair. I agree with you. You have a great fire department, and you can ask for a better group of people. I have a question about fire prevention. Do we do any kind of fire prevention with the businesses in our downtown cores?
Fire prevention part of it, it would depend on, like, if we're asked to go to an event, we definitely would do events. We do things through social media. We can put stuff out that way. We just attended one at the Essex Retirees Club that was based kind of towards retirees. But specifically to the actual businesses, we don't necessarily put those on a regular basis. It would be definitely at request.
Thank you very much through the chair. I'm asking because I do know that a couple of the businesses who are new-ish to town, they've reached out and asked why we don't do fire prevention or some kind of an inspection in the residential or in the commercial side for like our businesses downtown, like Fate, Tagged It, Blimey's. And one of our businesses actually had a third party come in and do her own assessment and found that she wasn't in compliance in a bunch of things. For example, there was no exit signs in her business that she had to put up. But those are all things that could have been prevented if there was some kind of walkthrough to prevent for fire prevention. So I'm just wondering if maybe that's something that we can take a look at. It doesn't have to be yearly, maybe biannually. Every 2 or every 3 years, maybe even every 5 years, we just go through and we update, we make sure that all of our businesses are still in compliance.
Well, obviously, we do have inspection schedule that we maintain. So there's definitely certain businesses or occupancies that, that we try to get into on an annual basis. And that depends, once again, on their occupancy, what's inside the building, what's required by the fire code. So if it is required to be annually inspected, we definitely get into those buildings and annually inspect them. And obviously, right, it comes down to, we did 330 inspections last year. On the time. If we had more time, we could definitely make those more routine to get into some of these commercial businesses.
Mayor Bundy, so this kind of comes down to what they were talking about before during the master plan is the resource allocation that we have. So based on the number of staff that we have, that's a significant level of service change that we just wouldn't be able to have based on the time and resources that we are looking at right now. So if that's something that council wishes for us to do, then we could certainly look at that internally or kind of do a business case on what that would look like. Potentially there's a fee structure that we could apply to do those inspections to have some revenue generated for offsetting that position. We can look at that business case, but that's what it would come down to, the resources that we have currently.
I'm just going to say, I appreciate that, Director Morsu, and I'm not going to put that forward because we just got a whole whack of list of things that we have to do for the fire department. But I will look forward to seeing what we come back with from the recommendations from our previous meeting, and maybe we can talk about it then.
You, just if anybody's watching at 4:30 tonight on YouTube, we had an earlier meeting. So if you're watching and you're interested in seeing what we're talking about, we had a whole special meeting dedicated to our community risk assessment and fire master plan. I have Deputy Mayor Shepley, then Councillor Allard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you. I do get inspected by you guys every year, and you do point out everything that needs to be done. And so far, we've been on a good working relationship there. So it's nice. I always enjoy the visit when you guys come through. It helps us to put a little peace of mind for us when you come through and do that. A couple things. One thing I noticed on might be just a typo on Station 2. It's for officers. It lists Ed LePen as a fire chief. Should that be a district fire chief or is he a fire chief? Just for curiosity's sake. And then I have one other question after that.
Yes, so that might be a typo. Ed DePan is a district chief at Station 2. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. No, I just noticed that. I was just wondering if did we have two? I didn't know. And my second question is, I see that we have a vacancy in our assistant to the deputy chief. Where are we at with that? And or if you've got anything you can update us with at this time.
Yeah, we're currently in the recruitment process now, and we're conducting interviews with human resources.
Thank you for all that you guys do.
Thank you, through the chair. I just want to speak on the peer support that you guys are going to offer. I think that's great because you can have all the physical attributes. If you're not mentally there, if you're somewhere else, that kind of thing, you're no good. You guys do a great job. Thank you.
Councillor Allard, that's a good statement. Great coverage recently in the local paper about recruitment. It's exciting to see so many interested people try out for to be on our team. And I also was witness to a recent fire at a business in Colchester. And I just want to publicly say that the staff and the owner were really impressed with the professionalism and the amount of compassion our fire department had during the fire. So I think you're on the right track. You're doing a good job. If there's no other comments at this point, I will look for a motion that we receive the Fire and Rescue Services report for information. Moved by Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Allard. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Moving on to Fire and Rescue Services, Emergency Management Program and Emergency Response Plan. Back at you.
Yeah, the purpose of this new bylaw is that the Emergency Management Civil Protection Act requires that municipalities formally adopt the emergency management program through the passage of a bylaw. So there is mentioning of our emergency management program in our current emergency response plan and our emergency response plan bylaw. However, Emergency Management Ontario requires that a full program bylaw, they require that full program bylaw for 2024 compliance, which includes emergency response plan and the emergency management program combined into one bylaw. So basically within this bylaw, it encompasses that we have a committee and we meet monthly, which our committee is Director Morissette's our coordinator. We have a municipal emergency management control group in place. We conduct annual training and an exercise. We have public information officer in place. We do public education and emergency preparedness on a regular basis. And we do have an emergency response plan. So basically they wanted all that encompassed into one bylaw to get our 2024 compliance.
Thank you. Before I go to council for comments, I'll seek a motion that the Fire and Rescue Services report be received and that the Essex Emergency Management Program and Emergency Response Plan be approved and submitted, and that bylaw 2315 being a bylaw to adopt an emergency management program and emergency response plan be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed on April 2nd. Needing a mover and a seconder for that, please. Councilor McGuire Blaze and Councilor Verbeek. Questions and comments from council. Councilor Hammond.
Mayor. Just a couple of things. It says here we have a $50,000 emergency fund set aside. In this? In an emergency plan?
After last year's three major storms, we put in this year's budget of funding, kind of as a contingency these emergencies have, which is $50,000.
Okay, on that, of this fund, is it like a rollover and will it accumulate in subsequent years? Because I don't think 50,000 quite covered our emergency last year.
To your Mayor Bonnie, no, it did not cover last year's emergency, but we had to put a placeholder in, as you know, as tough budget deliberation.
Mhm.
And the goal is whatever money's not used, it would be put in a reserve for future years.
Okay, but will it accumulate? Will it keep going up each subsequent year, like another 50?
That will be up to
Whatever's not
council.
used?
At this point, I would assume we probably put 50,000 in unless it's a trend, more climate change emergencies. We may increase it, but right now probably be annual 50,000. If anything's not used, we'll put it in a reserve.
Okay, good. That brings me to my question, is our 50 or 17% increase in calls due to these storms and stuff like that? Do we have any kind of frame as to how much that costs us in extra funds for those extra calls?
Through your Mayor Bonnie, I don't have the number with me offhand, but it was a substantial increase like to our call volume,
Mhm.
but it wasn't a major impact on our operating budget for wages.
One other thing, for this fund, what will constitute a emergency? Is it, like a road over, a tree over a road that one of our crews got to go out and clear off? Or is it, do we declare a state of emergency, or is it something that goes to council and they have to distribute these?
The intent of that fund is to be used outside of, when it be operations. So a tree in the road would still be covered through infrastructure operations. It's kind of an extreme circumstance, not necessarily a declared emergency, but outside of the norm actions we would have to take.
Okay.
Seeing no further questions, all in favor? And that is carried. Councilor Hammond, your mic is still on. Moving forward, planning 2024-08 draft plan of subdivision approval, Ducharme Lane residential subdivision phase 2. And for this, we will go to our manager of planning, Ms. Jabor. She is on Zoom with us. Welcome, Rita.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor and Council. We have prepared a short presentation in addition to Planning Report 2024-08 concerning draft plan approval for proposed residential subdivision located along Ducharme Lane in Ward 2. And we are going to pop that presentation on the screen, and we will move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. The purpose of our report and presentation tonight is twofold: to provide members of council with information respecting the subdivision, and to recommend council pass a resolution of support for draft plan approval with specific conditions to be forwarded to the Manager of Planning Services at the County of Essex for final approval. This presentation will also serve to inform the public of the proposed subdivision. However, this is not a statutory public meeting wherein which the sole purpose is to hear comments regarding the subdivision from members of the public, and a decision is rendered at a later date. Council is requested to render its resolution on the proposed conditions and the subdivision tonight. Next slide, please. We're going to begin by talking about the subject lands. So on this key map that you see in front of you, the subject lands where the subdivision is proposed is identified in the gray overlay. As you can see, it will be an extension of an existing residential development that is located along Ducharme Lane. Next slide, please. So a little bit more information about the subject lands. They are located in the McGregor Secondary Settlement Area, and they are designated hamlet under the Town of Essex official plan. The McGregor Settlement Area is identified in red on the map that you see on the screen. Essex Center, which is a primary settlement area, is the larger triangular area located at the northeast corner on that map. Growth and development is primarily directed to those primary settlement areas, including Essex Center and Harrow, but provincial policy, County of Essex policy, and Town of Essex policy do allow development in smaller settlement areas such as McGregor. Next slide, please. So in this slide, we provide some more detail on the subject lands. The lands are presently vacant. They are located on the west side of Ducharme Lane. Ducharme Lane, as we explained earlier, is developed exclusively for single detached dwellings. The lands are also zoned for development of the same housing type, single detached dwellings, and are also subject to a holding restriction under the zoning bylaw, which delays the construction of dwellings or homes until there is a formal development agreement between the town and the developer. Infrastructure has been placed to service the subdivision, and this includes roads and sewers, and this is the responsibility of the developer, and when the subdivision has final approval from the County of Essex. Next slide, please. So in addition, the lands are also located next to the Greenway, which is a system for modes of transportation other than cars and is owned and managed by the Conservation Authority. Next slide, please. On this slide, the subject lands are outlined in blue, and the existing residential development that we refer to on Ducharme Lane is more easily seen. So on this aerial map, you can see that most of the lands next to the subject lands are constructed and built out for single detached dwellings. To the east of the subject lands, you'll also see where the Greenway is. In the next slide, we will be discussing environmental considerations, but we're going to stay on this slide for a bit. So you will see that the lands are located just south of a woodlot. So to the north of the lands, you'll see a forest. There's also some natural vegetation along the easterly property limit, which is shared with the Greenway. Most of the lands are also within the regulated area of the Conservation Authority, due in part to the influence of the Walker Drain, which parallels the 12th Concession Road. So the drain would be south of the subject lands. Next slide, please. Okay, and we're going to move on to the next. Thank you. And the next slide, sorry. Okay, thank you. In this slide, we're going to talk a bit about servicing considerations for the subject lands. The lands have street access to the 12th Concession Road. The 12th Concession Road is a local road, and it's built and constructed to accommodate local traffic. The 12th Concession Road connects to County Road 11, which is a major county road, and that's built and constructed for the movement of local and regional traffic and leads to bigger employment and retail areas such as the City of Windsor, Town of Tecumseh, and the primary settlement area of Harrow. The lands do have access to municipal water and sanitary sewers, And because they're next to an existing development, there are stubs for those services right at the subject lands. However, because McGregor is located between the town of Amherstburg and the town of Essex, servicing for water and sanitary is actually supplied by the town of Amherstburg. And next slide, please. So in the next series of slides, we will be talking about the proposed plan of subdivision. The plan of subdivision proposes the creation of 18 lots for the construction of 18 single detached dwelling units. Next slide, please. So when referring to a single detached dwelling, we are simply referring to a single family home. It's strictly a house with one housekeeping unit. Next slide, please. So we're going to spend some time on this slide because this slide shows the layout of the proposed subdivision. You can see on the screen the 18 proposed lots. In addition to these lots, there is a large block identified as Block 20, and that block is dedicated for stormwater management, specifically a stormwater management pond, which will eventually be owned and maintained by the town of Essex after it has been constructed by the developer. There's also a block along the Greenway for natural environment protection. And this block will be conveyed to the Conservation Authority so that it becomes part of the Chrysler Canada Greenway. Due to the size of the development, it's not a large development, the town has requested cash in lieu of parkland for development of parks in the area instead of a physical parkland conveyance. There are existing hydro poles on the subject lands. So as part of the development, all the existing above ground hydro poles to the south of the property will be rerouted through the development underground, and Hydro One will retain an easement over lot 14 for access to that infrastructure. In terms of drainage, a drainage report is still being finalized, but there will also be an easement along those lots that back up onto the Walker Drain to provide a working corridor for drain maintenance by town staff. The easement would also prohibit fences, structures, and pools within those lands. Next slide, please. Thank you. So here is a conceptual plan of the subdivision, and the area in yellow on each of those lots just indicate the potential building footprints of future homes. Also identified on this conceptual plan is the proposed right-of-way, which includes the road, which will meet development standards for the town of Essex, and sidewalks. Next slide, please. So in terms of the complete application submission for a plan of subdivision, the county has requested a number of studies that were submitted to the satisfaction of the town and its agencies. And those studies include the following: an archaeological assessment, a stage 1 and 2, which has been reviewed and entered with the Ministry of Culture and Tourism, a setback opinion memo for the natural heritage feature, which has been reviewed to the satisfaction of the Conservation Authority, and that's where we got the recommendation to convey Block 20, the natural heritage feature, to IRCA, a functional servicing report and a stormwater management report, which has been reviewed by the Town of Essex Infrastructure Department and the Conservation Authority, and a water servicing memo, which has been reviewed by the Town of Essex Infrastructure Department and the Town of Amherstburg because they supply water servicing to this development. Next slide, please. Planning Services has also reviewed the proposal and has concluded that it is consistent with the Town of Essex official plan and the zoning bylaw. Next slide, please. So in terms of recommendations, the Town of Essex administration is recommending approval of the draft plan of subdivision subject to the following conditions: that the applicant enter into a development agreement with the town, and this is a typical condition for any large-scale residential, industrial, or commercial development. Secondly, that the applicant provide cash in lieu of parkland, and this will be consistent with any future parkland bylaw or official plan policies respecting parkland the town approves. Thirdly, that the applicant provide an easement for drain maintenance over lots abutting the Walker Drain. And this easement will be prepared following the drainage report. So we will be able to have more detail on the lands affected and the conditions of that easement. And lastly, that there's a condition respecting the allocation of sanitary servicing. So as we discussed earlier, servicing for sanitary is supplied by the town of Amherstburg. Sanitary servicing in this area is very limited. We only have capacity for these 18 lots. So to secure capacity for this development, we will make it a condition of draft plan approval. Next slide, please. So in these slides, we will talk very briefly about next steps. So tonight, being April 2nd, Council is being asked to provide a resolution of support with the recommended conditions that we just described and as presented in Planning Report 2024-08. The County of Essex, after receiving the resolution from the Town of Essex, will provide their notice of decision with the conditions to the applicant and the town. Town of Essex Planning Services will then begin to prepare a subdivision agreement for Council's adoption with the recommended conditions from the county. The applicant will then sign the agreement, and then he or she may commence construction on the municipal services, being the roads, the water sewers, the sanitary sewers, the stormwater management infrastructure, and gas and electricity. The applicant has 3 years to satisfy all the conditions of draft plan approval that have been issued by the County of Essex. Final approval of the subdivision from the County of Essex is only granted following completion of all the conditions and the installation of services, allowing for the lots to be sold individually and for construction on homes to begin once that hold is removed. Next slide, please. Thank you. That concludes my presentation. I am joined here with members from Infrastructure Services, Community Services as well, to answer any questions that council may have.
Or questions, comments from members of council? I have Councilor Verbeek and then Councilor McGuire-Blaze.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Jabbour. I just have two to start. Is there a condition, or can we put a condition in place that the money in lieu of parkland remain in a fund for future parkland needs of McGregor? As you know, it's really hard to come across those funds when they're needed, and we don't have a lot of opportunities in the future for cash in lieu of parkland because we're at the end of capacity in McGregor, so we're not going to have any more influx of parkland money. If that doesn't go into a fund for McGregor now, can we do so? And I guess I'll just ask my second question and then whoever wants to answer them. I think this would be Mr. Gerard. I look at these drawings and I think of myself as a counselor getting the phone calls right away from all the people that are currently on Ducharme Lane because of the trucks. Is there an option when the construction begins for the trucks to enter through that easement, that hydro easement, as opposed to coming up and down the existing road?
Questions? Who wants to answer the first one? Okay, Director Morissette.
Through you, Mayor Bondi. So we did verify, and the parkland dedication money would stay within that ward. So it can be used towards future funding for Ward 2 parkland.
Question, Director Gerard.
Chair, so as part of any new development, a pre-construction meeting will occur prior to any start of construction. So we have the ability to dictate which the routes in which they are permitted to use. So we would keep them out of the existing subdivision. They would be permitted to use the one entrance off of the 12 concession, but not the most westerly entrance.
Please.
Thank you through the chair. So I'm all for growth, and it's part of our strategic plan. But our strategic plan is responsible growth, and this doesn't feel responsible to me. We have 40 to 50 residents on Ducharme Road who are begging us and writing petitions to help them with flooding not only in heavy rainfalls, but in light rainfalls as well. We've done studies. We can't tell them what the issue is other than maybe their downspouts are in their sewers. I don't think adding another 18 homes to this area is responsible unless we can help the residents, the 50 residents on Ducharme, fix their flooding issue. I see here that you have a stormwater management pond, and that's where you're saying that these 18 residents, their water is going to go to this pond, and they're not going to affect those 40 to 50 homes. I don't believe that as a resident. Like, if it was in my backyard, I would be super, super angry about it. Is there any way that we can make this stormwater management pond work for the entire street? So that way we can help mitigate some of the flooding that these residents are having.
Thank you, Mayor Bondi. To Councilor McGuire Blaze, I think you may be confusing this with the Masaccio subdivision in terms of the flooding issue we're encountering with the residents there.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying. Then strike that. I also want to say, along the back here where we have the natural area, for the Chrysler Greenway, and we're going to, we have a block for natural area that we're going to eventually hand over to the CA. I'm wondering if we can, and I don't know if it's now that we do it or if it's later down the road when we're doing the subdivision plan, make it so that way there's fencing, that mandatory fencing that's put in there, so those residents don't creep into the greenway space. I know that that's an issue that the CA is having with other parts on the greenway, so maybe to help mitigate that for them, we can do that.
Hands up.
Through the mayor. So the exclusionary fencing is actually a condition that the Conservation Authority has recommended. So the County of Essex will likely include that as one of the draft conditions of draft plan approval, but we can reiterate the same in our list too.
I do have a couple questions myself. So we're talking about 18 homes, but in those 18 homes, in theory, could each one have a secondary dwelling unit in the house and then an ADU on the property? So by right, could it be 18 times 3? That's my first question. Director Chadwick?
Thank you, Mayor Bondi. Yes, in theory, each of the single detached dwellings could have up to 2 additional dwelling units, meaning 1 main dwelling and 2 additional units either in the main dwelling or detached from the main dwelling, so long as they would, or as long as the ADUs would meet the regulations for things like lot area, setbacks, etc., lot coverage rather, setbacks, parking, etc., and no different than any other urban lot. However, if the servicing is available, so the constraints here in McGregor are quite different than an urban area. If the servicing, for example, the sanitary is not available, then we would need to consider any application for an ADU. Although permitted by right in theory, they would need to meet regulations and zoning bylaw and make sure that there is servicing available for it.
What Councilor McGuire Blaze is saying, Ducharme and Masaccio are not that far apart, and Masaccio has had significant sanitary backup, and we did send Amherstburg out to investigate. What reassurance do we have today that sanitary backup isn't going to happen in Ducharme? Director Gerard?
Thank you. Through you. So we have had multiple conversations with the town of Amherstburg regarding their water and sanitary systems. Like many municipalities, including ourselves, they're faced with challenges with I&I, or inflow and infiltration, which during large weather events are causing stormwater to enter into the sanitary system and surcharging the system, which is why we have subsidies, and many municipalities have subsidies available to those residents now, because I&I and surcharging of sewers due to rain events and climate change they're uncontrollable. I can assure you that through the development process, and as Manager DeBoer mentioned, There was an FSR, a functional servicing report completed as part of this development. In a dry event, it noted that the pipe is only going to occupy about 60% capacity, so it would still have an additional 40% capacity, factoring both phases 1 and 2 of Ducharme. In addition, the FSR also made a recommendation to install sewage ejection pumps in each one of the 18 homes, which would create a hydraulic grade separation between the home and the sanitary system, which would provide additional protection against basement flooding. We are going to be recommending as part of the development agreement that be a condition included in the development agreement that sewage ejection pumps be included in basements for those 18 homes.
I'm just worried about the residents that currently exist here. I have Deputy Mayor Shepley and then Councillor Guerin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you. Just a quick question on that. Maybe you kind of covered it there. I'm not sure. But what the backflow valves, are they mandatory for these new home construction? And if not, is it something that we could make mandatory, especially in an area like this?
Yes, new home construction is required to have a backflow preventer. In the instance that I just described with a sewage ejection pump, you would not install both. One kind of supersedes the other. So sewage ejection pump would be a better protection than the backflow prevention device. Instead of the sewage traveling under the footing of your home, you're actually pumping it into the, just like your sump pump, into the air and above. So when the sewage backs up, it's not backing up at the footing level, it's backing up at the pumped level. So that additional protection would be there. One other thing that I can mention as well is that Ducharme is actually serviced by a lift station as well. So at the end of the sanitary sewer system of Ducharme phase 1, there's a lift station that actually pumps the sewage 6 feet in the air as well. So sewage would have to have a significant amount of surcharging for it to go all the way from the lagoon system all the way to Ducharme, and have to actually reach over that pump station and back it up. So there's an additional measure there as well.
And then Masaccio. Councillor Guerin.
Thank you, through the mayor. Yeah, so I want to talk more about the stormwater management pond. Looking at the existing developments in and around this proposed one, there are no stormwater management ponds because they were probably built years and years ago. But I don't think I've recalled seeing many developments that are using 30% of their potential lots has stormwater management pond. I think that's a lot of an area. Can you speak a little bit to that? Why this one seems so large? And I would also want to ask if by building this stormwater management pond the size it is, will the existing developments in and around it actually benefit from that pond?
Sure. So phase 1 of Ducharme actually does have a pond. Although it was developed at a time when stormwater guidelines were a little less stringent. So I would say that the current pond for Ducharme is approximately a quarter to a third of the volume of what is being proposed for the phase 2 lands. You're right, it's a large pond, but that pond has to accommodate not only a 100-year storm, but a 100-year event plus a stress test. So it's an equivalent of 142% storm. So it is slightly larger, and that's because of the Walker drain outletting into the Canard River. We wanted to ensure that we were retaining more water, not to exacerbate an already existing flooding concern in the Canard.
Sorry, and through the mayor, further then, is this development to phase 2, is it the same developer, same property owner?
Through the chair, one of the partners for sure. There was a partnership for phase 1, I believe. I'm not sure, I can't speak to phase 2 whether it's a partnership, but it is certainly the same developer.
Okay, so then lastly, by building this pond, because it's taking storm water from the roads, et cetera, any developments in and around it will benefit from this pond as well, right? It's not going to just take storm water from the new development. It's going to take it from the 12th concession, however it hits it.
Through the chair, so that pond itself will only benefit phase 2, and it'll discharge water into the Walker drain. The 12th concession would shed directly into the Walker drain uncontrolled, but still accommodated within that drain. The lands now currently do flow uncontrolled into the Walker drain. However, they are agricultural land, so the water runoff wouldn't be as great as they would be as developed land, which is what requires the storm pond.
Mr. Moore, or Director Chadwick, what type of or how much public consultation did we do for tonight's meeting? I know we have like guidelines and regulations, and then I'll seek direction from council.
Thank you, Mayor Bondi. So as for the amendments to the Planning Act, technically speaking, a public meeting for a plan of subdivision is no longer required under the More Homes Built Faster Act, otherwise known as Bill 23. So although it's no longer mandated, administration recognizes that providing members of the public is still important. And so what we did in an effort to inform adjacent landowners is we circulated the notice as if it was a public meeting, which is property owners within 120 meters of the subject site. And of course, we still prepare a presentation to council on a public agenda. I hope that provides you some insight. Thank you.
Okay, looking for the wishes of council, the recommendation on our agenda is that the planning services report be received and that the manager of planning services for the county be requested to give draft plan of subdivision approval to 1128737 Ontario Limited for the development of phase 2 of Ducharme Lane residential subdivision in accordance with the draft plan prepared by Dillon Consulting dated February 20th, subject to the following conditions listed in the agenda item 1 through 5. So what are the wishes of council? We can move it, we could second it, we could table it for more public feedback or consultation. Up to you. Needing a mover and a seconder if we're doing Councillor Guerin. Moved by Councillor Hammond. Any questions to the motion? All in favor? And that is carried. All right, moving on. Finance and Business Services 2024 Union Water Supply wholesale water rate, needing a mover and a seconder that Finance and Business Services report be received and that council approve an amendment to Schedule A to bylaw number 2291 to reflect the fee presented by Union Water Supply System effective April 1st, 2024. Needing a mover and a seconder for that. Moved by Councillor McGuire Blaze, supported by Councillor Guerin. Any questions? Deputy Mayor Shepley.
Madam Mayor, just curious on this one. This is a rate increase done by Union Water. It's not just because there's been some confusion that we would be raising the fee. This is a Union Water raise hike, not by this council.
Director Gerard.
Yeah, that's correct. So this is the Union Water supply charge. So if you are looking at your bill, you'll see a supply charge and a distribution charge. This is the supply charge directly from Union Water and its board.
Director Gerard, I just think there was some confusion on that I've received a few calls on it, and I'm glad that we were able to clear that up. Thank you.
Union Water's asset management plan, they're going to have, steady but stable increases, just like anything else to maintain infrastructure. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Parks and Facilities, Colchester Harbor Security Services request for, quote, looking for a mover and a seconder that Parks and Facilities report be received and that council award the Colchester Harbor Security Services to Inessa Security Services for the harbor season, May to October, and that council allow the contract to be extended for 2025 and 2026 harbor season. Director Morissette.
Mayor Bondi. So I just wanted to introduce Vince Murphy. He is the Assistant Manager of Parks and Facilities. So he works out of the Harrow Arena and does a lot of the operations for the Harrow area and the Colchester Harbor. So this is his first council meeting, so be nice to him.
He got the memo. We don't bite. Welcome, Vince. Is there anything you want to add?
No, good evening, Mayor Bondi and mayors of council. Just if you have any questions, let me know. I'll be open to answer them as I can.
Okay, thank you. You're doing a great job at the Hare Arena. The back looks great. Looks really nice and tidy. Keep up the good work. Any questions? Counselor Hammond?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. Vince, the people that we're going with, have we used them before? I know we had some trouble, I believe, with last year's, security. They kind of left.
Yeah, so
Um,
last year's security contractor that was originally awarded the contract has folded. And this is the company that fulfilled the term from the last part of the fall.
Well, the reason I ask is because looking at the quotes and stuff like that seems very low in my eyes as far as when you break it down to hour. Do we have backup plans should this same scenario arise again this year?
I'm not sure what the procedure would be if they were to fold. I'm assuming we would have to approach purchasing department to see if we can go with the second tender.
Through you, Mayor Bondi. So yes, we would go back down the list of the through the tender process and figure out which ones would be next applicable. But we did get most of last year using this company, and there were no issues once we started using the company. So the previous company, as Assistant Manager Murphy mentioned, went bankrupt, and we were kind of scrambling at the last minute with this company fulfilling it. So we did have a number of good meetings with that group, and they did a good job fulfilling everything that we asked them to afterwards. So we're confident with the process and the preparations of getting this PO out to this group.
Through you, Madam Mayor, just a quick question. So I see we're with the possibility to extend it for 2025, 2026. That's provided we're happy with the service. Like we can opt out if we're not happy at the end of the season. I'm sure we will be. They did do fine towards the end of the season.
Through you, Mayor Bondi. Yes, that's correct. The reason that this report is coming in front of council is because it's a multi-year contract. Otherwise, we wouldn't typically come because it does fall within the budget. Because it's multi-year, that's why we're coming to council. So pending that they fulfill everything, there's no issues, and we're happy with the service that's provided. That's the reason why we would extend the extra 1 or potentially 2 years.
Seconder, Counselor Allard, did you have a question too? Go ahead.
For Counselor Morissette or Deputy Morissette. We're saying that this will come back to us before the next year for 25, 26. It'll come back to us to say whether we approve.
Through you, Mayor Bondi. No, so administration would do an evaluation with the contractor at the end of the season to see if there were any issues. And pending there's no issues and everything ran smoothly, then we would work with purchasing to extend that agreement. So it wouldn't necessarily come back in front of council unless we were to change the service to somebody else.
Seconder. Counselor Garin, Deputy Mayor Shepley, all in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Moving on to Capital Works and Asset Management Planning Consulting Services. Needing a mover and a seconder that the Capital Works and Asset Management 2024 be received and that council award the 2024 and 2025 Asset Management Plan Consulting Services to PSD citywide and that council approve additional funding of $30,871 above the approved 2024 capital budget of $60,000 from the town's Ontario Community Infrastructure Reserve. Looking for a mover and a seconder, and then we will discuss. Councilor McGuire Blaze, supported by Deputy Mayor Shepley. Questions, comments? Councilor McGuire Blaze.
Thank you through the chair. Did we get a quote from anybody else for this service, or did we just go with PSD? Sorry, through the chair.
We engaged PSD because they were the consultant that completed the previous asset management plan in 2022. So they completed all of the asset management work for core assets within the town. They are also completing a cleanup of our inventory as well. Right now, our asset inventory, which is a significant undertaking. Based on their experience with both the core asset management plan and their work with the inventory, they would be the cheapest option to go with. We did engage some other consultants. We didn't receive formal quotes, but we received numbers well in excess of them.
Sure. So when you say that we're going to have a cost savings of $7,800 by using PSD, how do you come up with that number if we didn't get pricing from anybody else?
Through the chair, we did seek other quotes. We just did not receive proposals from them. We received numbers from other consultants of what their prices would be.
And then this says it's for 2024 and 2025. So can we assume then that the money that we're putting aside, the additional $30,000, that's going to cover us for 2025, and we won't have to come back for this particular issue again and ask for more money in 2025 to complete was the mandatory works that needs to be done?
There, so so in 2022, the core assets were required to be completed. 2024 is by July of 2024, we have to have the same asset management criteria completed, but for all assets, which would include all non-core assets. Then there's also a requirement by July of 2025 to complete all assets with proposed levels of service. In order to complete everything by that July 2025 date, we would need to start that work now based on the schedule provided by the consultant. The costs that are included in the report are all-in costs to do all of the work.
Not just for the mandatory 2024 works, it's also for the mandatory 2025 works. So in saying that, and we're going to be borrowing $30,000, sorry, I wrote the fund down and it's OCIF reserve. Do we then have a plan in place for in 2025 in our budget to replace that reserve fund with the $30,000 for the works that should technically be budgeted for in 2025?
Those monies are grant monies. So OCIF is grant monies. That reserve is in place for unspent OCIF money. So those are monies that have been unspent in the past for previous projects because we had cost savings or whatever criteria. So this is a reserve that is used to kind of float that grant money. Any details on that? Manager Eunice is here that she can explain that as well.
Next question, sorry, is how much is in that reserve fund? Do we have a number? If we're taking $30,000, almost $31,000 out of it in 2024, how much is in that reserve fund?
Through the chair. So because we do get allocated funds on the grant, and we've already allocated some of those funds for projects that were in our 2024 budget, if using this extra $30,000, we would still have just over $100,000 left that we could allocate for projects.
Questions from members of council? I have a mover in a second. Yeah. Okay, seeing none, all in favor? And that is carried. Operations 2024-03, Deer Crossing sign on the third concession. Looking for a mover and a seconder that the operations report be received and that council direct administration to install the signs as recommended within this report. Moved by Councillor Allard, supported by Deputy Mayor Shepley. Any questions on this? Councillor Allard.
I'm just wondering where the two signs are going to be put. One is at Arner and the other one doesn't have a road by it.
Through the chair, there is a map provided with the report. In consultation with the Essex Region Conservation Authority, it was agreed that we would place the signs on each side of the bush that is close to Arner. So where the potential is highest for the deer crossing. So all those details were provided by the Conservation Authority to ensure that we were placing those signs in the appropriate locations.
Thank you, through the chair. I have to ask, why is a sign $300 a piece?
Director Gerard?
Through the chair, when we procure pricing, that's the best price we got.
Thank you, through the chair. Who's the company issuing our signs at $300 for square meter, square by square sign?
Through the chair, I don't have the vendor now. It follows our procurement policy, which would be actually for this amount, we could sole source, but we typically get 3 quotes. But we purchase a lot of signs. So I would say $300 a sign is not out of the realm of unreasonable.
I would just like to say, I think we need to do some shopping for sign. Anybody out there who makes signs, $300 a sign seems a little bit crazy and a little bit price gouging for a deer crossing sign. So I encourage anybody who owns a sign company to reach out to the town and give us your best price.
The recommendation, and that's carried. Environmental Services Housing Enabling Water Systems Fund. We will go to our director, but then after that, council will need to pick option either 1 or 2. So we'll have Director Gerard go through it, and then I will seek direction from council.
I'll just have wait for the presentation to come up. If you don't like the sign pricing, you're not going to like this report. Through the chair, thank you. So as a quick introduction, this is a presentation that we put together to kind of clarify and present verbally and visually the Housing Enabling Water Systems Fund being provided by the province. So as you can see on the slide, the province has released, as many of you are aware, the province has released a Build Faster Fund with a goal to build 1.5 million homes by the year 2031. This funding was released, the Housing Enabling Water Systems Fund was released for a $200 million fund available province-wide. As of March 21st, 2024, that was increased by $625 million to $825 million province-wide. This grant is being provided to support municipalities to repair, rehabilitate, and expand wastewater systems, water systems, and stormwater systems within municipalities, with the conditions that they would enable growth in housing opportunities, increase access to potable water, and increase treatment or management of wastewater and stormwater systems. Next slide, please. So the maximum funding of the program is 73%, or up to a total maximum of $35 million, with the remaining 27% to be funded by the municipality. The conditions of the grant are that the projects are not to be started before September 30th, 2024, and they must be completed by March 31st, 2027. Soft costs such as design are eligible retroactively back to April 2023. So any costs incurred by municipalities if they were successful in obtaining the grant would be for design would be allowed to be reimbursed up to April 2023. The project must, as mentioned, must enable housing. You must have completed your duty to consult through the duty consult through the Planning Act or through the municipal class environmental assessment. It must be informed by the town's asset management plan. It must meet or exceed applicable energy efficiency standards, and it must meet or exceed the requirements of the highest published accessibility standards of the day. Next slide, please. So for the town of Essex, the only eligible project that would meet the criteria of the grant is the Colchester South Sewage Lagoon expansion. The town completed an environmental assessment in December of 2023. A copy of this document is on our website under reports and publications. That EA did discuss plant expansion of the Colchester South Sewage Lagoons. In addition, it also included upgrades to lift stations within the conveyance systems, which are listed as lift stations 2, 3, 5, and 6, and 7. Upgrades to the influent pumping station. So the pumping station that brings the sewage into the lagoon system as well would require upgrade, as well as the construction of a sequencing batch reactor plant, which you can see in the image attached. which would be phase one, so everything in blue. In addition to the infrastructure that's proposed in blue on the diagram, the project also includes the decommissioning of the existing lagoon system and changing it to a wet weather flow attenuation pond. So in essence, what that is, very similar to the North Malden's water pollution control plant. When the town receives increased I&I flows from stormwater events that we talked about tonight, those flows are diverted into the old lagoon system, stored there until wet weather flows are reduced, and then pumped back into the system to be treated and put back into the environment as treated sewage. The total estimated cost for all of phase one upgrades in the MCA document was $42.8 million. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to get into a little bit of the challenges which are outlined in your council report. The biggest one is schedule. So schedule, it takes about 2 years or 24 months to build a plant of this complexity, and about another 16 months to design it. So in essence, for us to be able to complete the project by March 31st, 2027, we would have to tender the project and have it start construction before March of 2025. So that does not leave us 16 months of design. However, we have reached out to our engineer of record, Stantec Consulting, who also completed the EA. And as a globally recognized firm, they can actually pool together global resources to design this plant within 12 months, which would put us within the window of the grant eligibility. Excuse me. But that would mean that the design would have to be procured and sole sourced to Stantec Consulting and start immediately, starting in essence tomorrow. As you can see from the schedule attached to the slideshow, I've kind of reduced the schedule that was in your council report into some major milestones. You can see that today, obviously, we're here for the report to council. We would initiate design like literally tomorrow. Grant application is due this month. We would expect to, as I mentioned, tender for construction by February 2025, start construction immediately, and have it completed by March 2027. Next slide, please. So this is a table from your report. So what this is actually a refined table from the EA document. So the EA document spelled out everything that was in white, which are the costs for the influent pumping station number 1, pumping station improvements within the system, as well as the wastewater treatment facility, which totals $28.6 million. What's important to note from this table is that we've included a 25% contingency for the project, so a substantial contingency for the project, knowing that we're still at the preliminary design stage. Also, the grant application itself does include provisions to include a 25% contingency. And then further refined within this chart is the design costs. So the engineering design costs of $2,106,000 for the engineering design, which would be the work that would be sole source to Stantec Consulting if council wished to go that way. And then further to refine the figures for construction to provide a full picture of what this project looks like. If we were to procure Stantec Consulting to complete the tendering and inspection and contract administration of this project, it would be another $2,322,000. There's some miscellaneous expenses to manage permitting and utilities and things like that of $305,000. So that further refined the total cost of the project, including net HST at $41,195,500.80. Next slide, please. So we wanted to be able to provide council with a financial impact to this project as a whole, not just what would be, sunk costs for applying for this grant now, but what would this mean if we were successful or unsuccessful in this grant, and what would we have to plan to do, and what impacts would that have on us financially? So the two main funding sources for this project that can be used are development charges and working with a, excuse me. And what development charges are, as many of you know, are monies paid by developers and home builders on building permit issuance to the town to fund the cost of growth-related infrastructure. When we consulted our Watson and Associates, who is our current consultant for our water wastewater rate study that we're completing now, the consultant had proposed that the cost split between development charges and for development charges would be about 84%. So we could cover 84% of the total cost of the project with development charges. The wastewater reserves, however, are monies paid by users of the wastewater system for the maintenance renewal of that system. The consultant proposed that the additional 16% contribution from wastewater reserves would be necessary to basically pay for what benefits would be to the existing system if we were to replace it. So 84% of that system, of that cost would be benefiting growth directly with 16% benefiting existing population. Next slide, please. So in light of the challenges that we're facing for this grant, it's important to note that the costs that are associated with the grant application itself. So the costs in the slides here represent the funding structure for the engineering design that needs to be undertaken ahead of the grant announcement. So as you can see from the slide, the engineering design and miscellaneous expenses total $2,453,433 to actually, because the DC reserve and the wastewater reserve don't have sufficient balance to cover those costs, it's proposed to fund this design by borrowing internally with a debt level of almost $2 million, $1.95 million, which would incur about $230,000 in interest, making the total cost for design not the $2,453,000, but $2.683 million. So there are some interest costs that we would have to bear in order to borrow against this. So the source of funding for this, as proposed by our consultant, would be 84% development charges and 16% wastewater reserves. So what's also important to note from this slide, sorry, if you can go back one more, Cassandra. So what's also important to note from this slide is that these would be considered sunk costs. So if we apply for the grant, if council decides that we want to apply for the grant, we would have to authorize the expenditure of this amount to the consultant tomorrow, and we would bear these costs solely, regardless if we were successful in the grant application or not. So council, obviously, if we receive the grant application, we have the ability to turn away those funds. So if we decide that we want to proceed with engineering design, get the project to be shovel ready, we can do that. And then when we receive the announcement from the province and what that funding model will be, we would present that to council. You always have the opportunity to turn down funding. It's not exactly, it's pretty frowned upon to put it in a grant application for $30 million and then say, oh, no, thank you. But you do have that option available to you. But you have to realize that regardless if we go ahead with it or not, we would be investing over $2.6 million into the engineering design of this plan. Next slide, please. So Director Jurusevich and I actually prepared a table included in your council report, which we split into two scenarios. So this one here is scenario one. So the two scenarios are essentially scenario one, getting the grant, scenario two, the grant's denied. So in the first scenario with the grant approved, what's important to note from the table is that the engineering and design, we would be able to apply those funds to the grant application. So although they are sunk costs if we're denied, if we do obtain the grant, we are able to apply up to the 73% towards that engineering design. So you can see the source of the funding is 73% grant and 27% town. So the town would fund that 27% from a combination of the 84% DCs and 16% wastewater reserves. We would be required to take debt to complete this project. Because the project is going to be just over $38 million plus engineering design, we would incur interest of just over $2.1 million because we would have to take in totality debt of $8.9 million. So from the table, you can see that the project total is just $43.3 million. Of that grant, the province would pay $30,951,000, and the town would have to contribute almost $12.5 million towards the project. Next slide, please. So in scenario 2, if the grant was denied, we would have those sunk costs associated with the engineering design. However, and we would be able to keep that design, and we would be able to shelf it, and we would be able to apply for grants in the future. We would, that design doesn't necessarily go stale. It may need to be revisited if we go to it in the future, but it's not going to cost $2.5 million. If we take a look at completing this project in the 2031 and plus range, so pushing this out multiple years, we would be looking at a total town contribution for this project of $63.8 million. Because what has to happen is because the town is no longer receiving funding from the province, we would have to fund the entirety of the project, which would result in just over $22 million in interest. So what's important to note here, and what's included in your report, is the impact on debt. So the total estimated debt required for this project, if we were to do it on our own without the grant, is $40.4 million in debt. As mentioned in the report, in addition to the financing costs, we have to keep an eye on our annual repayment limit, or our ARL. And what that is the ARL defines what new debt payments and principal amounts the town could take without seeking further ministry approval. The 2024 ARL states that the town could obtain up to $77 million in new external debt under a 20-year term at 5%, which means that this new debt is within the ARL and would be permissible under the ministry under both scenarios. So whether we were to have to take the $9 million in debt or the $40 million in debt. However, what's important to note is that under scenario 2, should the grant be denied and we have to build our own, the town would be using over half of its prescribed available debt capacity in the forecast range from 2031 to 2041. So this is not considering any other debt, any other projects. Just this project would use over half of our allowable ARL. Next slide, please. So what we also wanted to do is provide council with what that impact is to your growth community as well as your existing customer base. So as we mentioned before, there are two funding models that can be, funding sources that can be used towards this project. There's wastewater reserves and DCs. So in the scenario where the grant is approved in consultation with our consultant completing our rate study, we would be looking at a 9% wastewater rate increase year over year, which would result in an approximate wastewater bill of $83.87 a month. Excuse me. And that monthly increase would be about $6.92, like $6.92 a month to your customers. What I will note here is that this is based on the average consumption. So the $83.87 as well as the $6.92. This is based on the average consumption of all customers of 27 cubic meters per month. However, residential customers don't use 27 cubic meters a month. So this is factoring in commercial, industrial, everybody on the wastewater system in general. Typically what we would see out of a residential user is using somewhere between 5 and 10 cubic meters a month. So this would be slightly reduced for the residential customer, but would have an impact on your customer base. So it's important to note what the average user use, not just your residential user. The other thing to note is the development charges. So the impact on your development community. So right now, the wastewater DC for Ward 3 is just over $3,000 or $3,003. That DC through the DC study would likely increase to $6,000 if the grant was approved. Under the grant denied situation, we would essentially be pushing the requirement to build this plant into the segment 2031 to 2041. So we would still be looking at a rate increase to customer base of 6%, regardless of whether we get that grant or not. So if we don't get the grant, 6%, get the grant, 9% year over year. That would be a total monthly impact of $81.56 to the wastewater customer, or approximately $4.61 to the average user per month. The impact, however, to the development community will be going from $3,003 to approximately $25,000 per home. And that is what's important to note here for the development charges, is that this is only the wastewater DC. This does not include any other DC for soft services or any other category but wastewater. Next slide, please. So obviously having a large financial impact, we also wanted to provide council with a benefit versus risk. Let's call it FAQ or a scenario that's included in your report. We thought that it was important to note some of the benefits and risks of different scenarios. So the first one that we wanted to discuss with council is, what if the town completes the design of the plant but doesn't receive the funding? So the project would sit shovel ready until council commits to the increase in debt and funding sources proposed in the financial impact section. It will make this project more desirable for other grant applications in the future, because we will actually be shovel ready, whereas today we have to basically complete that design before we can be shovel ready. Spending the money on the design now will be less expensive than it will be in the future due to anticipated increases. And the town will be required to take on debt, approximately $1.9 million, which would be repaid through development charges as they're collected. Next slide, please. So the next one is, what if the town receives full eligible grant funding from the province? So the total of 73%. So at that time, council will have the option to review the terms of the agreement if we're successful in receiving any funding. So as I mentioned, we can take the funding, or council also has the option to turn it away. If successful, administration will make recommendations based on the proposed agreement for the province. So we will be making recommendations if council wants to go down the road of applying for the Housing Enabling Water Systems Fund. We would make a recommendation based on what we receive from the province. So looking at the actual financial impact, as all of these are estimations at this point. The town would then be required to fund the remaining 27% of the project, which is broken down in the financial impact section. And as I mentioned, council always has the option to turn down that funding. However, the cost of the design will be incurred, and there could be a negative political perception of refusing awarded grant money, or from both the local and upper tiers of government, as well as the public. Next slide, please. We've also identified through pretty extensive research and some discussions with other consultants that there's billions needed in infrastructure improvement of this nature across the province, especially in light of the changes to the DC Act and Bill 23. Everybody is looking to accommodate growth and fund these systems, as obviously you can see there's a significant cost to them. We do believe that it's likely that the funds will be dispersed to municipalities who provide the greatest potential for housing starts. Although the province hasn't necessarily publicly released that, I think it's safe to assume that it will likely go to the municipalities who show the greatest potential, which may be focused on larger cities and cities in the GTA. The other thing is that disbursement of the funding could also be based on economic development. So obviously Windsor-Essex region is booming with economic development, with the battery plant, Gordie Howe International Crossing, amongst many other hundreds of millions of dollars worth of investment in the region. So if there is a rating that is for economic development, there is a high chance that we could receive that funding. Next slide, please. So then the big one, what if the town builds the plant and growth stalls? So there is an increased cost to operating a plant as opposed to, so there's obviously more hydro costs, gas costs, chemical costs, different things like that, that would cost the town more money than it does cost to accommodate a lagoon system. The development charges reserve, used for plant expansion expenses will take longer to recover, as we would have nobody paying into that DC reserve. The town would need to explore flexible payment arrangements in the case that monies from the development charges are not sufficient to cover the required payment. Could mean an increase on interest in the outstanding loan balance. Some of the more environmental qualities would be that this plant is far more environmentally friendly than a lagoon system. It would meet more stringent effluent criteria, and it would help protect the town's drinking water sources, which include the Harold Colchester Water Treatment Plant, as well as the Ruthven Union Water System intake as well. The plant would also help to reduce phosphorus levels in Lake Erie, which are the cause for algae blooms and blue-green algae, which everybody is familiar with. And this is all in accordance with the Western Basin Lake Erie Collaborative Agreement signed by both the province and Michigan in 2015. The town's current lagoon system is aging and becoming less reliable and will require significant capital in the medium term, so 5 to 10 year horizon. We are already noticing that we're having capacity issues at, our 60% capacity right now. So, knowing that additional growth is coming, it may become difficult for us to actually manage and run the plant in the short and medium term. And then also the other benefit would be building the plant would allow us to create that wet weather attenuation pond, and the upgrades to the lift stations, which will reduce the risk of basement flooding in Colchester. So in essence, we would be able to store all those wet weather flows in the site, as opposed to them ending up in the sewers and within people's basements. So this would have a climate change impact as well. Next slide, please. So finally, the recommendations are one, to receive this report tonight, and that council make a decision on whether to proceed with option 1 or option 2. Option 1 would require administration to make an application to the Housing Enabling Water Systems Fund. It would also, council would also be appointing Stantec Consulting to provide engineering design services to complete the preliminary and detailed design of that plant. And that the total expenditure of $2,453,433.60 to complete the design of the plant from the Ward 3 wastewater reserve and development charges reserve. Alternatively, option 2 would be as simple as not submitting the grant application and pushing that plant expansion into the 2031 to 2041 horizon with the impacts that have been presented to you within the report.
Thorough job, Director Gerard. I have CEO Sweet, then Councillor Guerin, then Councillor Hammond, and then Councillor Verbeek.
Thank you through you, Mayor Bondi. Just wanted to follow up. I want to thank Director Gerard and Director Jarusevich for putting that together. And I think Director Gerard tonight did a fantastic job explaining it. Why we want to make sure this came in front of council is the public may hear, here's a grant up to 35 million, it's a no-brainer. But there are other impacts, and as a minimum, if you apply, we're committing $2.4 million, right? We have a plan for it, and we have the capacity to handle that. It's not an issue, but we need a council to be aware of that. And then with the other two options, right? If we do get the grant, it is up to $35 million. Doesn't mean you'll get that maximum amount. We anticipate that's what could happen, and if not, where is council going to move forward in terms of Colchester and developing that in the future? And that cost now potentially up to $60 million. So we thought it was very important because the public, and we've heard the grant 35 million, go ahead, but we want you to be aware of those impacts so you can have discussion and further debate on how you want to proceed.
Mayor. Yeah, actually, in theory and absorbing the information, wrapping my head around it, it actually might make more sense than the $300 sign. I think we've talked about Colchester. We've talked about the situation down there with the existing We have lots of development on the go and on the horizon in the Colchester area. So to me, we're kind of up against it like we were with the streetscape with this grant. But so are every other municipality, and there's 444 others that are going to be up to their council to decide. It's just something we want to tax our administration with, our taxpayers with, and try to get this rushed through. At the end of the day, you're looking at paying 27 cents on the dollar if we can make this happen. So couple things that they're going through my head here is, do we need it? Like we talked about our streetscape, we pulled the trigger on that. Did we need it? We felt we did need it. I believe we're going to need this in Colchester. Can we wait till 2030, 2040? Yeah, but as we've learned with everything else, especially since COVID, every year we wait and sit on it, it goes up more and more and more to do it. So we have to keep that in mind as well. The number I believe you said was 825 million is what's available. 825 million if each municipality that put in for this got 35. That's like 22 municipalities that could potentially get this $35 million each grant, which is about 5% of the municipalities. So that's what kind of concerns me. And then there's also some unknowns, such as like CEO Sweet just said, you know, because we got a $42 million project and they're allowing up to 35. So I mean, we're getting 35 or are we getting 10? You know, so there's the risks involved with it. But yeah, the 27 cents to the dollar is very intriguing. Looking at the debt on our books now, though, I believe we've learned from administration that in the next few years, we will have quite a bit of debt coming off of our books. So we need to keep that in mind too. I don't think we're going to get a final decision today, but to administration's report, which is very detailed and a lot of work, a lot of things to think about. We need to think about if we're going to do this sooner than later. But those are my opinions on it. I mean, talking about the Colchester area, we know we need that plant down there. And we know it's going to cost $42 million today. What's it going to cost in 2031, 2040? We got to keep that in mind.
So, Mr. Gerard, is it 2 million that we have to spend just to get the grant? Or is it 2 million we have to spend to get this project rolling?
Through the chair, so it's the $2.6 million is to make us eligible for the grant. We would need to start design immediately in order to meet the timelines of the grant application.
But the grant aside, is this money we still have to spend on this project?
Through the chair, yeah, that's correct. So if even under scenario 2, where the town would not be successful in obtaining the grant, where the situation would be that we would have to invest $64 million as opposed to $12.5 million, we would have to pay this money to design that plant.
Okay, and then moving on, say we get the grant and the project's moving on. Am I to understand that Santec then can make another $2 million on more designs for the project as it moves forward?
Yeah, through the chair. So the EA document spelled out all of that criteria that was adopted back in December, which included over $5 million worth of engineering costs associated with building the plant. So the $2.6 million, which we would kind of, we're coining as the sunk costs here, that would be just to design the plant. And then we would also need a consultant to manage the project. So somebody to be on site 100% of the time, managing the contractor, making decisions on behalf of the town in consultation with the town, managing the contract. I mean, this is a contract that would be worth $30 million. This is, you know, well out of our ability to manage in-house. So that cost of the $2.3 million to complete the design or the contract administration and inspection would also be required, yes.
Okay, one other thing that concerns me, and that was the conditions, meet or exceed, especially where 2 areas there. meet and exceed energy efficient standards. Is that regarding the homes or the lots?
The chair, that is talking specifically about the project. So any equipment, pumps, blowers, anything, lighting, HVAC system, everything that would be included within the actual sewage treatment plant itself would have to meet the energy efficiency standards of the day,
So
not the home.
it has nothing to do with the projects that will be tied into the,
No, it wouldn't have anything to do with the homes created or enabled by the project.
okay, thanks.
Thanks, through you, Madam Chair. I get, for a minute, I have to put on my ward hat and ask about, so I understand that we have to address the capacity issue in Ward 3, as we do in Ward 2. For the same reason, we have developers that are ready to move forward with projects, but not the capacity. So I guess my question is, was there given any, I can see the work that went into this report, and I can't imagine you doing it for 2 separate wards, but was there consideration given to, going after this grant in conjunction with Amherstburg to address, I mean, I know we've already put forward the money for the EA. Maybe is the EA the reason because one is complete already, one is in the works? Or was there just any consideration given to going after this grant to address the capacity in McGregor?
So the McGregor plant, or lagoon expansion, EA that's being completed, that's still in its infancy stage in comparison to this project. So this project has the EA completed, which the grant application requires us to have our duty to consult completed, or the EA completed. So the McGregor lagoon expansion EA is about 2 years behind this project currently. With that being said, there is obviously a need for sewage capacity in McGregor as well. Until we have that EA completed, we won't be able to present findings like this that we've done tonight to council until we know what those impacts are and what the recommended expansion to that lagoon system would be. So those are details to come. I can say that we did initiate the EA kickoff meeting a couple of weeks ago, so that project is expected to take about 18 months.
Through you, Mayor Bondi, just to add to what Director Gerard said, when this grant came out, first thought was the McGregor potential project. So I just want council to be aware that was because it checked off more of the boxes for the grant, right? There's 2 municipalities, it'd be less impact on our debt. Like there's a lot more pros, just unfortunately didn't meet the criteria of shovel ready in terms of that. So we did consider it.
About the existing capacity, I know we just been through this, but you guys have been great at giving us lots of information since Christmas. We just say, you know what, we're not ready to bite the bullet on this. Let's just go with existing. Our capacity now, how much more can we develop in Ward 3 with what we have?
We do have capacity existing within the sewage lagoons. But as we identified in the EA, because of the development that is literally at the door now, we do not have capacity to accommodate all of that development. So namely, the Colchester Bay development was the biggest trigger. That development alone would take up 50% capacity of our current lagoon. So we know that one development in itself, we cannot accommodate the full development. In addition to that, we have another 6 that are in the planning stages, whether they be in consultation, preparing for draft plan approval, or already having a final approved lot layout on the lands. And they're just going through servicing studies and design, right? So we have a significant amount of housing that's already kind of at the door waiting to see what we're going to do, to be honest. We can accommodate some of them, but as it always is with sewage capacity, it's a first come, first served basis. So whoever gets to draft plan approval first is who gets allocated their sewage capacity. And then similar to McGregor, once we hit that line, we kind of put a freeze and say, we can't accommodate any more development. So we will be put in that position at some point. We can't tell you exactly when that would be because we don't control the market and the development community, but we do know that we have very significant development in the planning processes now in Colchester.
Separately, Counselor Allard, Counselor McGuire Blaze, then Mayor Bondi.
Thank you through you, Madam Mayor. Couple of questions. So right off the hop, the $2 million, I don't know what we have in our solid waste reserve, but would we be able to loan ourselves the money and repay ourselves with interest and leave us in a better position going forward? I mean, at the end of the day, we've heard balances budget themselves, or budgets balance themselves, but we know that's not true. But I'm just trying to figure out how we can do this without putting us in a bad position.
Balances our budget, so I'm gonna give this one to Anne Marie.
So, because of the split, after speaking to our consultants with the 84 and 16% split, so 16 being on the wastewater reserves that we would have, we do have enough in our reserves if we had to. So we could lend, we could internally borrow, or we can borrow externally. So that would be up to us on that decision, but that is an option that we would have available for the, if we were to go along with the 2.6 million as it is right now.
Again, we'll see it again. So I think we're better to borrow from ourselves wherever we can, and better to reward ourselves with that interest. Having said that, if we were to go ahead with this and this plant was built, there would be no more. One of the things that happened in the last rain event that we went through last summer, we did do some dumping into the lake. With this new system in place, that would no longer happen. That water would not be allowed to be dumped into the lake. It would be into our reserve lagoons. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is the purpose of the wet weather attenuation pond, is to, rather than bypassing directly into the lake, we would store it. There is a capacity to that, of course, and the storm that we experienced in Colchester is a very, very significant storm. But in theory, we would be able to store all of that within the lagoon system.
Well, having said that, if we were to, I mean, this would go back to finance again. If we were to get this, say we've got the 73 million, that leaves us with, or 73, the 73%, the 35 million. Are we in a position, would we be in a position at that time of finding the extra 10 million without putting ourselves over that debt to ratio balance?
The chair. So if we were in a position that we did get the grant, we would still be okay from our debt ratio perspective to be borrowing. We would still be in the moderate level, so it wouldn't put us at any higher risk on that end, and we would still be able to explore the options of, if there's options internally to borrow, any option we have on that option as well.
For me, it's a tough one. I mean, I can see the value in having it there. It's just, we're almost playing a little bit of game of roulette here to see it. That we might make it, we might not, but it's $2 million that's going to be out there. And there's no guarantee that all those developments will go through, but I do see that area could use the better treatment plant to help with some of the problems that have been out in that area, and the possibility out there. I'm willing to chance it on this. I mean, I struggled with it, and I think it would be something I would be willing to support at this time, and hope that we get the full grant. That's where I'm at right now, anyways. Hear from everybody else.
Thank you, Counselor Allard.
I'm most worried about if we apply for the grant and we don't get it. We spent so much money on development or on plans. Is there a stop anywhere where we can say we can stop here, not spend any more money if we don't get the grant?
Through the chair, I don't think that is a very feasible option. And the reason why I say that is because if we invest the whole $2.6 million and we obtain a shovel-ready project, we'll be able to hold on to this design for when we need. If we decide to stop midway or partway through the project, we would likely have to either engage that engineering firm again or a new engineering firm if we had to pick up where that was left off, which could incur more costs. As Councillor Garen had mentioned, inflationary increases are a real thing. This plant would not have been $43 million 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So, I would not recommend stopping the project. I would recommend that if council wishes to proceed with the grant application, that we invest the whole $2.6 million to make a shovel-ready project.
Procedure, get to a certain point where you've got your plans ready, or your shovel ready, but you didn't get the money. Kind of thing.
Through the chair. So we're expecting that the grant will be announced in the summer at some point. It's going to take us until December to January to design this plant. So it's going to take longer to design the plant than it will be for us to find out if we were successful in the grant or not.
Wire Blaze.
Thank you through the chair. This did get me really hot. So you're right about the signs. I just have comment. This is a gamble, like Deputy Mayor Shepley said. But I think that it's the best choice. Even if we don't get the grant monies for 2024, I think the council in the future for 2031, so 2 councils from now, I think they're going to thank us for already doing the work and putting the money forward and making a financially sound plan to repay the debt that we're taking. By 2031, 2041, the debt will probably be paid by then. And they will already have plans that might just need tweaking. So it is essentially a gamble, but with insurance, because we're not going to lose out on these plans. We're going to be able to use them in 7 to 10 years when Colchester is at their capacity. We can't do anything more. People are flooding, sewage is coming into their homes, and the plans will be there ready to go. And we won't have to wait another 15 months just for plans. So it is a gamble, but like I said, with insurance. So I'm for going ahead with this and trying to get this grant money. It doesn't come up that often. It's really difficult. It's a very difficult decision to make, and I don't make it lightly. I wish that we had time to sit back and listen to our community and get some feedback. Unfortunately, as everybody saw the schedule, there's no time to sit back and wait and wait for opinions. We have to make a decision tonight. We're going to pay the bill tomorrow. So in order for us to get this grant money, which is huge, I am in support for going ahead of it. And I think that, again, it's a gamble, but with insurance. If we can't use it in the next 3 years, I think that our councils of the future will be able to use it. And I think they'll thank us because we only spent 2.6 million instead of 8.4 million. So thank you.
Excuse me. So since the beginning of this term of council, the deputy mayor and I and the CEO and I have met with our MPP, Anthony Liardi, asking him for infrastructure dollars for this very thing. So I think that if we don't at least attempt to go down this road, then I don't think we'll have luck in the future. So I think it's the right thing to do. And we're just taking steps in that direction. I had some similar comments too, like why Ward 3 and not Ward 2? Why didn't, no public consultation? Because frankly, I don't even know if Colchester wants to grow, right? Like when we start putting a lot of homes in Colchester, I think Colchester residents are going to be quite unhappy about it. But I'm thinking of it more from an environmentally sustainable point of view with what happened in the recent flood. And I think that having a sewage treatment plant is going to be better than the lagoons. And I think that's the way we need to go with everything now. I think we need it in McGregor. We eventually need to address the other lagoons here in Essex Ward 1. We have to look at this. So I had wished were able to do more public consultation, but we're up against a wall. And I have a feeling that if we aren't successful with this grant, we can lobby the province for another series of grants, right? If the province wants us to grow, we need money to be able to grow. So I am in support of taking this next step as well. And I'm wondering if we can also send, I don't know if we can reach out to our local MPP, let them know that we've applied to the grant. And if there's a letter sent, I'd like to be CC'd on it, please. So at this point, I'm looking for direction from council to go with option 1, proceed with the grant application, or option 2, do not proceed with the grant application. Looking for a motion from council. Direction. Councilor McGuire, please.
We'd like to put the motion to go with option 1, proceed with the grant application.
Seconder, Deputy Mayor Shepley. Yep, everybody gets a comment to the motion.
We wouldn't be able to add in that we would borrow the money from our solid waste reserve and repay ourselves with interest. I'm wondering if that could be part of the motion, or is that something we could deal with at a later date?
Be an alternative manager units, but I think it's not, our landfill reserve is still through the water reserves is what you were recommending, if you can clarify.
We explore which reserve, like, and internally, if we would be able to, and how we would be able to manage with that. I know when it came to the 1.9, it was a lot easier because we knew we had enough and sufficient, but with the 8.9, we were kind of hoping that in the future with some of the money on the rates that we would give us enough. So we would just have to double check that if all would be able to come internally with that amount.
We can come back with more information on that. Any other comments, Councillor Guerin?
Through the mayor, thanks. Yeah, I'm going to support it as well for many of the reasons I already spoke about, but I keep going back to, and Councillor McGuire has made a good point about future councils. We put roads off and we put them off, and then it comes time to do it. We still don't have the money, and it's 3-4 times more. So I think it is fiscally responsible to try to plan for it and do it now. We're going to have to put that water plant there one way or the other, whether it's 10 years up the road or 15 years up the road. And when we get a chance to get 27 cents in the dollar, and I really think that the government, who's pounding more homes down our throats right now, I mean, we're really just acting on what the government's telling us we have to do anyways. I really think the government will look to the smaller municipalities to try to help us out more so than maybe the large ones. It's a big chunk of change for any municipality that's going to be pondering this same decision next little bit. But I had one more question for Mr. Gerard, just before we move forward. We're talking about our needs for this grant, but what other needs for other municipalities would qualify for this type of grant? Like, what are some other projects that some other municipalities would be contemplating doing and putting underneath this particular grant?
Through the chair. So as I mentioned before, it can be used to expand or rehabilitate existing infrastructure as long as it creates housing. So I would suspect that through, very similar to what the town's looking to do, a servicing master plan, many other municipalities would have already completed this. They may have identified water plants, water mains, sewers, sewage plants, stormwater management facilities, all different types of literally water needs, whether it be from a storm, sanitary, or drinking water perspective. The challenges of every municipality are very unique. So I assume it's going to be a mixture of all. So I don't know if necessarily every application is going to be a sewage treatment plant or a drinking water plant. However, I do expect from the research that I've seen that some of the major municipalities and major cities, that's the direction that they're going. Whereas many smaller municipalities that don't treat their own water, don't treat their own sewage, maybe just looking at linear infrastructure upgrades.
Councilor Verbeek.
Thanks. Through you, Madam Mayor. On? Okay. Is it on? Okay. I did tonight, I wasn't going to support this. I've listened to everybody's comments. I just felt like the deputy mayor, it was just too big a risk, and a lot of unknowns and a lot of money. But now I'm getting a full grasp of this, and whether we get this grant or not, we'll be ready when the next ones come forward. And we'll have a much better chance at seeking future grants. And my hope is that 444 municipalities across this province start getting more vocal with upper levels of government to request and demand more money for projects like this.
Deputy Mayor Shepley.
Madam Mayor, just to follow up on what Councilor Verbeek was saying, by doing this, we're getting ourselves in a position to possibly get $37 million. If we're unsuccessful, we're still poised for other opportunities down the line, which I think some of the other municipalities may not, that aren't ready to be shovel ready for this grant are probably wishing they were in our position possibly. So I think we're in a good spot. It is a chance, but I do see the need for it, and I think going forward this is the right thing to do. So I hope that we get a lot of support on this. Thanks, guys.
Going to call the question, all in favor? Carried unanimously. Good work. Pardon me? Oh yeah, option one. Good work, Director Drusevich and Director Gerard. Operations 2024-04, results of request for tender supply of wood brush chipper 2024. Needing a mover and a seconder that the operations report entitled request for tender be received and that council award the request for tender of the wood chipper to Vermeer Canada Inc. in the amount of $135,000 and that council approve the additional $340 funded from the asset management reserve. Looking for a mover and a seconder, please, on this. Councillor Garron, Councillor McGuire Blaze, any comments? Councillor Hammond.
Yeah, and who can I direct this to? I got looking at prices of wood chippers, and this is a significant upgrade to what we've had. I'm just wondering what the significant upgrade is. Is anybody here to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Through the chair. So I can't speak to the specific specifications, but I can talk to it in its generality. So this wood chipper is significantly larger than our current wood chipper, and it would be able to take additional capacity. So what we learned from our multiple emergency events is that we cannot keep up with that type of fallen brush. In addition, we're likely going to be able to handle a lot bigger tree limbs and things like that to when we remove them from streets, as opposed to having to continuously hire out somebody who has the equipment that's sufficient to do it. In addition, as identified in the report, there is a contribution from the Community Services Department. So the plan for this, as presented in budget, is that Public Works will purchase the new wood chipper. We would surplus our current wood chipper to Community Services. They would pay for the remaining useful life on that wood chipper, and we would have two. And that would help us to take care of our regular maintenance, as well as address any emergencies in both the parks and facilities area, as well as Public Works and right-of-way area.
I have Councillor McGuire Blaze.
Thank you, through the chair. In the report, it says that there was 2 tenders received, but the second one, which was actually the lower of the 2 tenders, they were not able to meet all the required specifications. What specifications were they not? Since we were allowed to see the tender, I'm assuming they must have been pretty close, because if they don't meet all the tender recommendations, we usually don't even get to see it. So what specifications did they not meet?
So we do present council with all of the submissions all of the time. If the tender was if disqualified due to not meeting specifications, we just identify that in the report that they were disqualified. Again, I don't have the specific specifications of that chipper with me tonight, but the chipper was using the expertise of our Public Works division. It was a specification was created to accommodate the needs of the department. We would have received any bids that would have come across the counter. Some of those may not have met the specifications identified in the tender, so they get disqualified. We've had this with multiple supply tenders over the last couple of years, especially as it relates to snow plows. So for instance, we specify like the load capacity that the snow plow has to be able to carry, turning radiuses, different things like that. If they cannot meet that specification that we've identified, then we cannot take that piece of equipment because they do not meet the specification.
This was approved at budget already, if I remember correctly, and we're talking the difference of a sign. Half that we're gonna be awarding you. I'm willing to move this along when the time is right.
Seconder already. So if council is ready, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? You want that noted? No, okay. Reports from our youth council member. Exciting going on. You're supposed to bring the excitement here. County council update.
See you, Madam Mayor. We didn't have our second meeting last month, so there was nothing to report. Unless you.
No, thank you. Correspondence to be received. I'm looking for a motion to receive all the correspondence, and then if council members want to pull it up. Moved by Councilor Verbeek, supported by Deputy Mayor Shepley. All in favor? That is carried. Any council members want to pull out any correspondence? Councilor Verbeek.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. 13.1.2 from the Township of Amaranth. Operation budget funding. I'm just looking for support on it. It's, the township is, it just talks about how, we're prohibited, all municipalities are prohibited from running deficits. The pressures of our aging infrastructure, operating costs. It's just calling on the province for more money to help our municipalities. About it.
Councilor McGuire Blaze, any further questions on this motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Oh, Councilor Verbeek, where do we want to send it? Mike.
It's directed to the Premier Doug Ford, the Township of Amaranth, and our MPP. And if anyone on council, and the leader of the opposition party.
Any other correspondence that any other council members want to pull out? Councilor Hammond, did you have your hand up for one? Councilor McGuire Blaze, we'll buy you some time, Rod.
Thank you through the chair. I would like to pull out 13.1.3. It looks like there's a trend happening in our correspondence today. I would like to pull this just because I do feel like if our province is going to start favoring the city of Toronto and maintaining their roads, giving them money to for their debts, I think that the same should be awarded to other municipalities within the province. So this one here, I would just like to support the Loyalist Township. I'd also like to send a letter to them, send a letter to Doug Ford, send a letter to our MPP, and send a letter to the official opposition in support of this, that if they're going to take over the maintenance of the Don Valley Parkway for the city of Toronto, they can do so with other municipalities.
Looking for a seconder on that. I'll go Deputy Mayor Shepley. Any further comments on that one? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. Any other correspondence, Councilor Hammond? Mike?
13.16. Let me get it up here. Town of Push Links regarding Enbridge Gas. The township is get it here. The Ontario Energy's board decision to phase 1 of Enbridge Gas 2020 rebasing application, or the implications include putting into question the future access to natural gas that supports economic development. What they're producing is is taking away the rebates for hooking up new homes to natural gas, thus increasing your, the cost of, development fees and stuff like that. There. And, of course, the electricity not being able to, handle what we're, our future is holding. They're trying to get the resolution, removed regarding the energy gas presentation on stuff. I would like to support that and send it to MP and MPP Liardi and Lewis if we could.
Deputy Mayor Shepley, any further comments on that? Seeing none, all in favor? And that is carried. If there's no, Councilor Verbeek?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor McGuire Blaze is absolutely right. There's a trend here in these letters. It appears that a lot of municipalities across the province are experiencing shortfalls from provincial funding and assistance. So I'm looking at 13.1.5 and Bracebridge is that the right one? Right. So some of their whereases are the current provincial municipal fiscal arrangements are undermining Ontario's economic prosperity and quality of life. And whereas nearly a third of the municipal spending in Ontario is for services in areas of provincial responsibility, and expenditures are outpacing provincial contributions by nearly $4 billion a year. Municipalities are being asked to take on complex health and social challenges like homelessness, supporting asylum seekers, and addressing mental health and addiction crises. And the list goes on. And the municipality of Bracebridge has therefore be it resolved that the town of Bracebridge calls on the province of Ontario to commit to undertaking with the Association of Municipalities of Ontario comprehensive social and economic prosperity review to promote the stability and sustainability of municipal finances across Ontario. I would support that and hope that council may.
On that one, Councillor Allard, any questions on this one or comments? Sorry, this was a common theme at the county budget as well. All in favor of this one? And that is carried unanimously. Moving. Yeah, this the same list. We should have a list. Okay. Okay, correspondence to be received and supported. Ministry for Senior, oh, sorry. I'll do them one by one. Ministry for Seniors and Accessibility 2024 Ontario Senior of the Year request for nominee, looking for a mover and a seconder. That council received the correspondence from the Ministry of Seniors and Accessibility, and that council nominates as the Senior of the Year. Do we have a Senior of the Year yet? DAO Suite.
It's just to have the correspondence on. We're advertising right now. By the end of this month, we have to put a nomination forward. So it's out on our social media now, and we'll bring it forward at the next meeting on April 15th with the nominations and have council pick at least one member.
Through the chair. So should we hold that until April 15th? Yeah, okay.
Okay. So looking for a motion to postpone till the next meeting. Deputy Mayor Shepley, Councillor McGuire Blaze, all in favor? That's carried. 13.2.2 Essex Festival Committee, looking for a mover and a seconder to accept the resignation of Corey McLean from the Essex Festival Committee, and that council direct administration to write a letter of appreciation and thanks for her commitment. Councillor Guerin, Councillor McGuire Blaze, all in favor? That's carried. 13.2.3, I'll go to CAO Suite for a quick sec.
Mayor Bonnie, so this is as we keep moving forward with the OPP Police Service Board amalgamation. The next step is we've approved that the fourth community member at large will be rotated, and this year it's Tecumseh. So they have nominated Paul Sweet, no relation at all. But part of that is they have to send it to the other two municipalities, so that is on here. And the second part is because it's three municipalities, one had to take the lead in terms of administration, and all costs will be shared three ways, right? A third, a third, a third. And that's what the second point is there. So we're just getting our council also to approve that.
That. Deputy Mayor Shepley, Councilor Verbeek, any comments on that? Seeing none, all in favor? And that is carried. Essex Festival Committee, appointment of an Essex Festival Committee member, that the application of Caitlin Back be appointed to the Essex Festival Committee to be received and supported. Councilor Garen, Councilor McGuire Blaze, any questions? No? All in favor? That's carried. Committee meeting minutes. We have committee meeting minutes of the Committee of Adjustment and the Essex Center BIA, looking for a mover and a seconder to receive and approve and adopt as circulated. Councilor McGuire Blaze, Councilor Verbeek, all in favor? That is carried. And nothing under financial, no new business. We do have our notices of motion now. I'll go to our clerk, Director Malandrico.
Mayor Bondi, through you. Notice of motion 17.1 will be deferred to the next meeting. Notice of motion 17.2. The following notice of motion was first presented at the March 4, 2024 regular council meeting and subsequently deferred at the March 18th, 2024 regular council meeting and is being brought forward this evening for council's consideration. Moved by Mayor Bondi that council direct administration to review the development standards manual, including a review of the following items and provide a summary of what other towns are doing for the items. Use of V-curb and barrier curbs, use of water pipes used for the municipality, for example, plastic versus copper, maintenance period in the town of Essex, and use of surety bonds in both commercial and residential development. Moved it, seconded by Councilor McGuire Blaze. Any questions? Mayor Bondi.
The deputy mayor, myself, and Councilor Verbeek popped into, we had a developer roundtable February 9th, I believe, at Branco's House of Pizza. And in the evening session, we did a roundtable of issues that developers had in common. And these were some of the questions. And it just so happens that we're reviewing our development standards manual. So these are some of the things I'd like to have reviewed, and potentially with our affordable housing task force, we can use them to look at point number 4 a little bit and give us some ideas on the use of surety bonds in commercial and residential development. I've done a little bit of digging on this, and the Affordable Housing Task Force report that the province released in 2022 does highly suggest using surety bonds. So I know that we're against it, but I want to make sure that we are doing what we can to meet developers halfway. So getting a report on these, we'll just go through the list that the developers brought forward to the deputy mayor and Councilor Verbeek and I.
Through the chair, yeah, to administration. So not too long ago, we just did the development standards manual, I believe. Is there anything you can share with us tonight in considerations that you would have had and past and council would have had with respect to the points that Mayor Bondi is making in here? Did we already give consideration to this stuff when we developed the standards manual? And if so, can you share?
Chair. So yes, so we did what we originally, so I guess the original document, so we have not amended the newest version of the development standards manual. We did review the use of V-curbs and barrier curbs. And we did decide and council adopted the use of barrier curbs. The use of water pipes, we did review originally. Based on staffing at the time, it was recommended that we stay with copper pipes. With that being said, we have investigated moving to polyethylene pipe, which we're just kind of reviewing the impacts of that now. And we'd be able to make a recommendation on that shortly. So that's kind of in line with our current schedule. The maintenance period in the town of Essex, we did review that in comparison, as well as using bonds and what other municipalities in our region especially used for bonding and securities for developments. So we did do that review back then. But with that being said, we have every intention on bringing the development. We do have some things we want to clean up in the manual, like we do every development standards manual. You know, you use it for a little while, and there's some things that you would like to tweak or that we heard from our development community. We were already intending to bring a revision to the Development Standards Manual with recommendations from administration. So to undertake the investigation of these few items shouldn't be too onerous.
Further that then, so when you do, so it won't be limited to just the 4 that are in here. You'll give reconsideration to these 4, plus there may be some other ones you'll be bringing to us.
Yeah, through the chair, that's correct. Most of the changes that we've identified that we would recommend to council are more of cleanup language and some smaller items, so nothing of very substantial nature. It's mostly a cleanup effort based on using the document for the last couple of years. So, so these would be, if we were to move this route, these would be the most significant changes that we would be recommending or that we would be bringing forward as part of the changes.
Yes, I'll make a comment, then I'll pass it over to you. I was gonna say the same thing Councillor Guerin said. Oh. So I was gonna ask the same thing Councillor Guerin asked, and I'm glad you responded, because I knew we had just updated it because we had heard that a few times. So I was wondering what the foreseeable possibility was that you would have a change already, but that's good to know that we can have a look at these. Now, Mayor Bonnie, go ahead.
You know, as mayor, I'm tasked with the lead at this table to work with developers, which is part of my mandate, and that is what we did. You know, I spent money, my own money, on ads to host this, and so these are not, you know, Sherry's wish list. These are legitimate concerns from a roundtable of our local developers as to barriers in Essex. So comparing it, the reason why we want to compare it to what other towns are doing, because what we've heard, and that's why I want to get a report, because I don't know, like I can't make up answers to developers. I need to have it from administration. So when we get when we get it back, we can say like, no, now it's more black and white. So this is right from the development community, and the deputy mayor was there and Councillor Verbeek is there. So we had approximately 9 developers, 1 from commercial, some real estate representatives, and prospective developers. So it was a really productive meeting, and I hope that we can have a larger scale development open house in the future, because it is expensive and challenging to develop now. And I know we want to develop smartly and with caution, but we still need to listen and consult with our developers on the right. Thank you.
All those in favor? And that carries. So I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor Bonnie.
Alan Juclo.
Thank you, Mayor Bondi. Through you. Number 17.3, the following notice of motion was presented at the March 18, 2024 regular council meeting and is being brought forward this evening for council consideration. Moved by Councillor Verbeek that council direct administration to prepare a report which considers whether or not council should pass a bylaw prohibiting the release of latex and mylar helium balloons into the air in the town.
By Councillor Verbeek and needing a seconder. Councillor Allard. Councillor Verbeek.
Thanks. Through you, Madam Mayor. So I guess I'll just explain. The reason I bring forth this motion was because I wanted it to start a conversation. Thanks to the media, the conversation has started. I wanted to start educating ourselves and each other. That's easy enough to do. I mean, a quick Google search will give you all kinds of municipalities that are already moving forward with banning or have banned, and the reasons why. I was hoping it would create a discussion on alternatives to this, because this is there's meaning behind a lot of these balloon releases. They're done for memorials. They symbolize, in memory of a loved one. Grads are doing them, birthdays are doing them, birth announcements. So there is symbolism behind doing these, but there are other alternatives, planting bushes, planting trees. And I'm hoping that conversation will start. To be honest, 24 years ago, we planted a snowball bush for my dad. We've shared it. Almost every family member now has a cutting from it and a bush of their own. I wanted to bring forward some of the hazards that come forth from the release of the balloons. They've been known to cause power outages and fires. They've been proven to be harmful to animals, wildlife, livestock, domestic pets, birds and fish, air and water critters by ingestion and also by strangulation. The litter, yep, it's just ugly and there's lots of it. I've been my son and I have picked up probably one a week for the last 10 years, somewhere on the fields and in the ditches. Very important piece that I wanted to include was that they are wreaking havoc on our oceans and our Great Lakes. Maybe they don't necessarily go and land in a lake or a waterway, but they find their way there through our ditches, through our streams, our creeks, our drains. And so I'm just asking on council to support the motion that the administration bring us back a report that shows us, what a bylaw to ban releasing these balloons into the environment would look like. As I've always told my children, once we know better, we do better. And so just looking into this, I've already learned better, and I see how harmful it can be, and there are better alternatives. So that's about the reason I brought it forward.
Any other members of council? Deputy Mayor Shepley, and then Councilor McGuire Blaze.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I can appreciate the well-intentioned bylaw. I can't imagine that it's enforceable. I can't imagine our bylaw officer writing a ticket to a child that lost a balloon. I think a better, something I can get behind would be a campaign blitz or a media blitz by our communications guy on certain times of year, just to remind people of, because it isn't good for the environment. All those things aren't good, but I think we would be better served to have a media release to let people know the dangers of it and why they shouldn't do it, rather than to pass a bylaw that we have zero intention of enforcing. And we don't even have the bylaw officers that could do it. I think it's a waste of time to write a bylaw when we could do much more with the media release. That's my opinion. Thank you.
And then Councilor Hammond.
Thank you, through the chair. I was actually going to say almost exactly word for word what Deputy Mayor Shepley was saying. I feel like the only way to enforce this is by someone calling it in. And I can't imagine a neighbor calling in my neighbor's husband passed away a year ago. It's coming up on their anniversary and they're planning a balloon release. Make sure you're there to issue them a ticket. I cannot imagine that, and I don't want to see that in the municipality of Essex. So I unfortunately can't support your motion, Kim, but I do support a campaign that we can do, a media campaign that we can do that gives the negative impacts of balloon releasing and giving some environmentally friendly options instead of a balloon release. I do support that, but I can't support a bylaw where our neighbors are tattling on each other over grief. So I can't support it. Thanks.
Mr. Morissette, do we have a bylaw against releasing lanterns? The lighted lanterns? The fire lanterns?
Through Mayor Bundy, I don't recall offhand, but I think I do recall seeing something somewhere. I'd have to get back to you and do a little bit more research.
Okay, thank you. Director Malandrucolo?
Through you, the one thing I did want to say on this is the notice of motion is to have administration come back with a report that kind of discusses the pros and cons to passing a bylaw like this. So I think these concerns are all relevant, but I think it's something that what Councilor Rubik is looking for is for a report that's going to lay out kind of what the pros and cons are so that council can consider it. So I just want to be clear that she's not asking for a bylaw to be passed, but for a report to kind of consider the bylaw.
Blaze, and then I'll go Councilor Hammond, Councilor Karen.
Thank you, Director Malandrucolo, for the clarification. Although I do still think that just having our administration do the report is kind of a waste when I know that I'm not going to support a balloon release. So I'm still gonna vote against it.
Hammond, then Councilor Garen.
I too think we're probably better serving the public by educating them. Just listening to the radio today, I learned a lot more than I knew before. So Yeah, I think that's the way to go. You can do the report on a bylaw, but, once we pass a bylaw, it's forgotten. It goes in the back pages and it's a complaint driven thing again. Whereas, yeah, you want to do a campaign and educate people and then bring that up again every year or in the spring or something like that. I think we're better served doing it that way.
An answer for us.
Mayor Bondi, to your question in terms of the flying lanterns, to prevent unnecessary fires, the sale and use of flying lanterns is prohibited in the town of.
Further to that, how do we enforce that? Why do we have that bylaw if we can't enforce it? Do we enforce that? Does that happen? Or is
Through
it
you, Mayor
public
Bonnie, I believe the fire team, if they had potentially video evidence of somebody doing it, you know, they have ceremonies where people in their backyard will release tons of them. So if somebody had some recording, then we would certainly follow up on that. And I can't say without reading the bylaw if it's enforceable by our bylaw team or if it's enforceable by the fire staff. But if we have a bylaw and we have solid information that it was occurring, we would follow up on it.
Why we have a bylaw on it? CAO sweep?
Previous council, we had a similar conversation. I believe there's a notice of motion brought up regarding idling, right? Do we create a bylaw because it would be very hard to enforce? And from that, we do have a campaign which goes out 4 times a year in terms of idling. So we do have a past model which seems to work. Just so council's aware in a similar discussion.
Thanks for the mayor. Yeah, so we have lots of bylaws that are tough to enforce, and we have some that are easier to enforce and don't get enforced. So that's just the nature of bylaws. I don't think, although I agree with all your points, Councilor Verbeek, I don't think the report going to come back from administration is going to touch on anything different than you've already said. I really think a campaign, because it is one of those bylaws that I think it'd be tough to enforce anyways. I think a strong campaign educating people as to the, you know, severity of letting them in the air and what could happen with them, I think would be sufficient.
Before we vote, as I stated, my top reasons for bringing this forward were to get the conversation started, to get some education out there, to start having conversations, look at alternatives. I'm still hoping that we will get this report back from administration. I'm hoping my fellow councilors will do a quick Google and see how many communities across the United States and Canada have already put these bans in place and the long list of reasons why they have. We do have a lot of bylaws that we can't enforce, but it can work in a preventative way. We all know classes right now that a common practice is to send 40 kids out on the school ground and each release a balloon as their farewell as they go off and they soar into the future. Well, we have to encourage them to look at an alternative. And maybe if the teacher thinks that it knows that it's against our bylaw, they might choose another option.
Lee, and then Councillor Guerin.
I'm reading the room here and I don't know if everybody else is, but I wonder if there's a possibility, instead of asking for a report, if we could ask for them to come back with a campaign to make the awareness out there. I think that's something that we could all agree on is valuable and would probably get through this council tonight and would accomplish exactly what you've got the conversation going, you've got us all talking. I think it would be something that would actually go through and probably be somewhat more effective than a bylaw. In my opinion, I'm just wondering if that's an appetite out there for that.
There are many towns that have bylaws. I'm looking at one, the city of Kingston right now. So I think it's kind of antiquated not having a bylaw. That's just my opinion. Councillor Guerin?
Mayor, yeah, I was going to copy what Deputy Mayor said. And if schools it seems like schools is one of those ones where you're going to get a lot of kids letting them off. Maybe it's a letter from the town or from council to school boards to let, you know, warning them of the dangers of it. I think a strong campaign, piggybacked with some sharing that information with school boards and such, I think would go a long way.
as it stands is that council direct administration to prepare a report which considers whether or not council should pass a bylaw prohibiting the release of latex and mylar helium balloons into the air in the town of Essex. So if we get that report, we're getting the pros and cons, whether it's not enforceable or not. We can get it all. Councillor Verbeek?
I guess it's time to vote. My motion stands or it doesn't. I have, I've clearly worked with administration to get the motion correct. I'm asking to support the request for a report. I'm not asking for the bylaw. I'm asking for a report so we can make an educated decision when the time comes.
Of the motion? That is 4, opposed is 3. Motion carried. Reports from council members. We'll start at Councillor Allard.
We have eclipse sighting in Colchester on April 8th. So everybody come down to Colchester. There'll be glasses for sale, lots of room to see the sight.
Thank you.
I have nothing to report.
Thank you.
You too. Okay. Bylaws requiring a third and final reading. Bylaw 2316, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings in the March 18th regular council meeting, be read a third and finally passed. Councillor McGuire Blaze, Councillor Allard, all in favor. Bylaw 2299, being a bylaw to provide for the Austin C. Wright drain replacement. Mover and a seconder. Deputy Mayor Shepley, Councillor Guerin, all in favor. And that is passed. Bylaw 2300, being a bylaw for the Bondi drain in the township of Colchester South. Deputy Mayor Shepley, Councillor McGuire Blaze, all in favor. That's carried. Bylaws requiring a first and second reading. Bylaw 2319, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the April 2nd, be read a first and second time. Councillor McGuire Blaze, Councillor Guerin, all in favor. Thank you for joining us tonight. Motion to adjourn. Deputy Mayor Shepley, Councillor Hammond, all in favor.